Welkom bij Boeken. Ik ga straks praten met Marcel Meuring over zijn nieuwe roman De Louteringsberg. Maar ik ga nu eerst praten, ook over louteren misschien wel, met Darian Leader. Hij is een Engelse psychoanalyticus en hij schreef Het Nieuwe Zwart. Boek dat gaat over volksziekte nummer 1, depressies. En hoe kan het zijn dat depressies volksziekte nummer 1 zijn geworden? Wat betekent rouwen en waarom willen we altijd maar gelukkig zijn? Daarover zal het gaan. Welcome.
Hello.
Well, depression, disease number 1. Why is that?
Is it really disease number 1? According to the World Health Organization, it's one of the most important public health problems today. But only 30, 40 years ago, it was deemed to affect a mere 0.5% of the population, a tiny fraction. Today, it's deemed to affect between 25 and 45% of people, which is absolutely staggering. What happened in the last 30 or 40 years? Did everyone suddenly become more depressed, or has there been a marketing of the diagnosis of depression? That's one of the themes that I talk about in the book.
And what do you think?
I think that the answer is very clear, that the old definitions of depression were complex, they were subtle, they looked to see what was beyond people's surface symptoms, to look at the hidden stories of individual lives. Today, the emphasis is much, much more on specific symptoms, low affect, low mood, insomnia, loss of appetite, all symptoms which respond to drugs. So what we've seen in the last 40, 50 years is the definition of depression has moved from quite a complicated theory of the human psyche to one which is simply defined in terms of what drugs people respond to. So the drugs have created the market.
Drugs have created the market.
Yes.
You think
absolutely.
It's as simple as that?
I don't think in itself that that's a simple thing, and the historians have said some very complicated, the very complicated aspects to that whole history. But basically, in the 1980s, the early 80s, the market for tranquilizers collapsed. A lot of people were taking drugs like Librium and Valium. They were found to be highly addictive, and as that became well known and publicized, suddenly a huge new market opened up. The malaise of urban populations needed to find a chemical remedy. There were billions of dollars to be made from that. And it's at that precise moment historically that the first generation of antidepressant drugs start to become marketed. And what happened was that the drugs companies would pay for research, they'd pay for adverts in medical journals, they'd buy books and send them to GP doctors, telling them how to spot depression at the same time as telling them what drugs should be prescribed for it. So it was more or less created by the pharmaceutical industry.
You think that the drugs are prescribed too easy?
Much too easily, because when someone talks about feeling depressed, or that they're in a sad mood, or that something's gone wrong for them and they can't sleep properly, they can't eat properly, we have to find out what the particularity of their story is, what has led them to have those symptoms, rather than just saying it needs a label, it's depression, and we'll give someone a pill for it.
Yeah, but talking takes time.
Talking does take time, but we have
That's
to
one of the
accept
problems.
that.
We don't have that time anymore.
But we have to find the time. There's always a battle between those currents in contemporary life which try to get rid of human time, because after all, do human beings want to have time to think about themselves? Probably in some cases yes, but in most cases no. It's easier for most people to take a label and then take a pill. Luckily, there's some people who refuse that. Yeah,
telling stories about your life is important. You write about that too in your book. That's important.
Absolutely.
Constructing stories instead of taking pills.
Absolutely. Because there's always a story behind the symptoms that seem to require medication. And let me just give you an example recently from my practice. It was an elderly woman who was suddenly struck down with crippling back pain, and she couldn't move. She was immobilized. No. And many different consultants went to her house, many different physiotherapists. This was costing the National Health Service thousands of pounds. Talking to her, it turned out that she'd had nightmares at the same time as the back problem of having suitcases that she couldn't close, she couldn't finish packing. And it turned out that the morning on which she woke up with the crippling back problem was the anniversary of the date when, during the war, she'd been separated from her mother, the mother who she hadn't seen again for decades. And it was exactly at that date, the point of the traumatic separation from the mother, that she literally became immobilised, as if the guilt of having left her mother at that point during the war returned to haunt her, but not as a conscious thought, but literally in the body.
But what happened with her at the moment that she understood this? She could walk. She could walk again.
She could walk again after several weeks. It wasn't something that literally happened there and then, but it definitely had an effect. Making the connection definitely had an effect, and we can say that often people fall ill with what are deemed depressive symptoms in the place of memories, especially in the place of anniversaries, losses and separations from our childhoods and our pasts that we don't remember consciously, but we fall ill instead of remembering.
There's another story in your book, Het Nieuwe Zwart, and it's about a girl with a boyfriend in America.
Yes.
Maybe you could tell that story.
Yes, it's a fascinating story of a young woman who was diagnosed with depression and was offered antidepressant medication. She'd been in a relationship for some time with a young man in America. She yearned for him all the time. They tried to see each other as often as possible. All they dreamed of was to actually live together, finally, and bridge the gap of the Atlantic. At last, he moved to London, and suddenly she felt the love had evaporated. She no longer loved him, and she became incredibly depressed. She couldn't get out of bed, and then she realised after some time what it was. That in the long-distance relationship until then, it had all been based around the moments of farewell at the airports, what she called the 100 goodbyes. And now, suddenly, they were in the same space together. There was no longer the possibility of saying goodbye. And, of course, it brought back for her the question, again, from her early life, when her father had died, she hadn't been told that he was unwell. He died without her knowing, without her having been able to say goodbye. So beyond the relationship with this man, with the boyfriend, was the unresolved mourning for her dead father, the man she'd never been able to say goodbye to.
Talking about mourning, maybe we should watch John Cleese at the funeral of his friend Graham Chapman, also a member of Monty Python. Well, let's watch John Cleese.
Graham Chapman, co-author of the Parrot Sketch, is no more. He has ceased to be. Bereft of life, he rests in peace. He's kicked the bucket, hopped the twig, bit the dust, snuffed it, breathed his last, and gone to meet the great head of light entertainment in the sky. And I guess that we're all thinking how sad it is that a man of such talent, of such capability for kindness, of such unusual intelligence, should now so suddenly be spirited away at the age of only 48, before he'd achieved many of the things of which he was capable, and before he'd had enough fun. Well, I feel that I should say nonsense. Good riddance to him, the freeloading bastard, I hope he's tried. And the reason I feel I should say this is he would never forgive me if I didn't, if I threw away this glorious opportunity to shock you all on his behalf. Anything for him but mindless good taste. I could hear him whispering in my ear last night as I was writing this. All right, please, he was saying, you're very proud of being the very first person ever to say shit on British television. If this service is really for me, just for starters, I want you to become the first person ever at a British memorial service to say fuck.